Emperor, guide me, that I may destroy his enemies, that I may continue to walk in obedience to him and keep his commands, decrees, and laws." With these words, Abaya pulled the trigger and watched the enemy's head jerk to the side before falling to the deck of the ship like a marionette whose strings had just been cut. He slowly let out his breath. One more of the lithe-limbed servants of darkness departed from this mortal realm, returning to their dark masters. Abaya knelt in the working top. Each shot was a prayer. The weapon was accurate, but with the rolling ship, the high priest had to adjust and compensate for every single shot. At this point, he was missing more often than he was hitting. But it was enough to kill a few of the most dangerous enemies emerging from the bellies of the enemy ships. But it was not Abaya who would win the day. The Golem. Captain Fanuel cut through the enemy like a scythe through hay, leaving nothing but the bodies of heretics in his wake. The roar of his chainsword could still be heard through the volleys of musket fire belching forth from the allied ships of the Ashkenazi. The Phrygian vessels had closed the gap. Despite the disciplined fire of the musketeers, many of the enemy corsairs threw their grappling hooks and began to board them. Sometimes the deck guns were enough to drive them back, but a few were able to break through the Ashkenazi lines. The musketeers and the unhorsed Tamarine put up a gallant struggle, but the wicked ones, if they were able to close the gap, their speed, strength, and experience as sailors and raiders served them well, and the servants of the Emperor were cut down before their cruel blades. But behind the borders, Captain Fanuel moved from ship to ship, the blood of his enemies pooling at his feet. Following the Space Marines' example, the forces of the Ashkenazi and the Tamarine turned to fight and push back against the Phrygians, counterboarding them. Musket smoke filled the air as cutlass and saber crossed with scimitar and bayonet. As Abaya reloaded his rifle, he could see soldiers mustering in the streets of Gordium. Many of them bore the marks of corruption on their flesh. They had become twisted mockeries of humanity. One monster had a second set of arms that grew from his sides. Another had the jaws and teeth of some ferocious beast, and eyes like inky pools of shadow. Still others had fingers that had fused together into tremendous claws like those of a scorpion. The twisted monstrosities swarmed in the city, though it would still be very difficult for them to bring their full strength to bear in the streets of Gordium itself. Abaya pulled the bolt on his rifle and locked another round into the chamber. One heretic at a time. The miscreants on shore would have to wait their turn. The sea battle was turning into a rout with Captain Fanuel leading the charge. Even the heretics that slaughtered their way onto a few of the Ashkenazi vessels found themselves in a brutal crossfire when the musketeers on the ships to port and starboard of them unleashed their brutal volleys. Hot lead tore through the ruined forms of the enemy as the servants of the Emperor surged forward. The remaining enemy vessels tried to break away from the engagement, scrambling back to their ships and trying to catch the wind and tack away from the Ashkenazi fleet. The Golem was not about to allow any heretics to escape. Captain Fanuel delivered a mighty headbutt to the final heretic on the deck of the Abattoir, one of the final ships of the Phrygian line. With the skull of the heretic pulped, the Space Marine gazed over the rail of the vessel to see another ship with the Dark Mistress emblazoned on the side of its hull. The golem rushed to the rear of the ship, running over to where the anchor was secured. With one swift motion, Fanuel gripped the heavy iron and tore it free from the ropes that bound it. With a heavy chain trailing behind it, the golem's pistons and actuators strained as he roared and hurled the anchor towards the escaping ship. Cries of alarm and surprise rose from the terrified crew as the anchor smashed through the top deck of the vessel, sending splinters and shards in every direction. The Dark Mistress suddenly lurched to a stop, and many of the sailors fell to the deck. Before they could even reach their feet, Captain Fanuel was already sprinting his way across the length of the taut chain. A few of the crew managed to fire their cursed black arrows at the Space Marine, which glanced harmlessly off his ceramite armor. What happened aboard the ship when the golem set his boots upon the deck was of little consequence. Recounting how the golem slew the crew to a man would be like sharing the details of how a child amused itself by crushing scurrying bugs with his thumb. It wasn't much longer before every heretic aboard the Scarlet Fleet was dead, dying, or trying futilely to swim through the shark-infested waters of the harbor that was now thick with the flesh and blood of the dead. Captain Fanuel stood at the helm of the Dark Mistress and turned her toward shore. He held his chainsword above his head and bellowed his commands. "Servants of he whose guiding light will never fade, prepare for landing. Ashkenazi to your guns, and Temerine to your horses. Today we make the streets of Gordium run red with heretic blood. And we will not stop until we topple the Dark Tower and purge this place of all corruption." A roar rose from the men as the battle for Gordium began. No man do they call me, my mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Thank you all for listening to the latest episode of the Heart of Iron series. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a like and a comment so that one day you too can use ship anchors like a grappling hook to prevent your enemies from escaping your wrath. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so in order to hear more stories about space-age super soldiers destroying demon-corrupted Iron Age societies. If you would like to support me, you can do so via Patreon, PayPal, or Teespring. Those links will be in the description. And if you have absolutely no idea what's going on, you can click on the Heart of Iron playlist to start the story from the beginning, and that should be appearing on screen right now. Thanks once again for listening. No Man out.